Salutations, one and all, and welcome to the Drop Dead Gorgeous Gallery. I am your host, the Sinister One, Murky Monday, and allow me to be your guide in our newest exhibit, Blondie. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family. This time we are doing Deborah Harry. I named it Blondie because, everybody thinks of her as Blondie, although Blondie is actually the name of the band and not really her, but I'm sure if someone says, hey, Blondie, she'll, turn and answer your call, especially since she says to call her on the line, and that you can call her anytime. You can call her. And let me tell you that these were the times, as when I was a kid. Blondie was weird for me because there was a time when I was in between worlds as a child musically. I loved Kiss, and so I was into rock and roll. And I liked disco. Disco beats were kind of cool. I liked them. I was too young to be at a discotheque, but still a little kid with energy is going to dance to the disco music. But Blondie was weird because Blondie was kind of like a punk rock thing that went disco, and it was just a little weird. But I would certainly say that Blondie's success came from many coke-raged nights at a discotheque somewhere in the world. They have, and she has, an incredible discography and lots of hits. I challenge you to tell me that you haven't heard the song Call Me, or that you haven't heard Heart of Glass or Rapture. One of the precursors in the earliest days of hip hop. She mentions Fab Five Freddy and Grandmaster Flash in that song Rapture, and she busts out a little rhyme. It was a little childish at the time, a little amateur at the time, but she knocked it out. She spit them bars, at a time where not too many people really knew what was up with the hip hop community. But at that time there was a lot going on in New York, with CBGB and the clubs and stuff like that, and the different musical tastes of the people at that time, and this was my earliest years, I was just getting into in high school at this time, so I was still young, but I was at the age where I was venturing far out to travel, with my friends, and we would do things like go to New York, and spend time running around getting in trouble, because Philly got boring. What does that say? You know what I mean? Run around Philly so much, you got to go to New York, But at the time, there was a lot going on in New York, and it was a different time, and a different New York. I'm not going to lie, the New York that's there now is not anything close to what it used to be, and that has really nothing to do with what happened on 9/11 or anything like that. It had lost that hardcore New York identity in the 90s, when they tried to clean it up and everything, and it was no longer New York. When the 40 Deuce didn't have peep shows on it no more, you had a whole different New york. But that's the New York that I remember, that's the New York that I'm nostalgia for, Anyway, so I decided that I would paint Deborah Harry in this, and the reason why I decided to do her was to kind of put a couple things to rest about how I was going about doing things. The first three people that I did, they were men, that was one, so I need to break that and paint a female. The first three people that I did, they were all dead, and thank God Deborah Harry's still alive, so I wanted to paint someone who was alive. And I wanted to paint someone who, it's not this, I mean, I don't know who doesn't know Blondie. I don't know who doesn't know this woman. But, I imagine that there are people out there that don't know who this woman is. It's been that long ago since, her impact was felt in the world. Not that she's not relevant today, but, if she's relevant to you, you probably got gray hair. You know what I mean? And, this is the epitome of cool. This lady was cool before Madonna. You know what I mean? So it's, and there's even this place where, she could quite be Marilyn Monroe's daughter. Just, if we're going to live in a world of conspiracy theories, that's one I'm going to try to believe. I like that idea, hell yeah. But just human me, trying to, paint someone who's beautiful and, put them in the gallery. I try to, do the best that I can artistically. I don't by any means strive for some level of perfection. I've been down that road before, where every little nuance has got to be perfect. I have fought and strained myself and my vision and my skin, my talents and everything, trying to get absolute perfect portraits, 100%, but at the same time, I think to myself, after having gone through all those things, at the end of the day, it's just a painting, and to me, at the end of the day, that's what it is hanging on the wall. It's just a painting, and you want it to look like a painting. And so for me, because I'm not perfect and I'm certain that any person that I paint isn't perfect, that, the imperfections are going to be there. And that's, my struggle to be better, evidence right there in front of you, my flaws, and I like that because, in showing you and letting you see and bear witness to my flaws, it gives you, a greater appreciation for my successes. To be quite honest with you, man, I don't really try to paint perfect portraits. I try to get 90%, and the reality of it is that I think I'm lucky if I get 90%, because a lot of times, man, I don't even see myself getting 80% of that person. But I see things differently now because I'm older, so my eyes are fucked up. So I see shit blurry. And to me, if I can see and recognize that person with 80% vision to look like someone at 80%, well, then it's probably that person. You know what I mean? And then we'll just chalk up the other 20% to my artistic license being creative. And in that place is where I try to make it a painting and not a photograph. Because if you wanted a poster, you could have bought a poster of Deborah Harry. You know what I mean? You could have bought a Blondie poster, but to buy a painting of Deborah Harry is a little bit different. You want it to look like a painting. You want to be able to look at it and see the brush strokes. You want to see the struggle of the artist trying to wrestle that image onto the canvas. And that's what I like to do. That's my battle. And so in this, while you're seeing different things, you'll notice that some parts of the painting in these video images, they're not even done. I haven't even gotten to that yet. And so you're getting to see in those areas of the painting, that time frame where it looks terrible, looks horrible, and I struggle with it myself. At one point, in current events, Jake Paul just had a fight here recently, and he's been in the hospital. And at one point, I wanted to say that, her jaw, a friend of mine came by and looked at this, and I said, yeah. He said, oh, is that Deborah Harry? And I said, wow, I'm surprised you recognized her, considering that her jaw looks like Jake Paul, all swollen and inaccurate looking, and he laughed and giggled or whatever. He said, no, she's there, but, you just got to get to it. I know how it is, I know what it is that I'm doing. And I realize that, I'm in the ugly stage, and I haven't really finessed and finished all the details and everything. But, there comes that stage where, she was looking pretty much like Jake Paul, her jawline was pretty rough, and certain things don't really, you paint things in layers in a way, right? So, you got to paint the thing that's underneath something before you paint that thing. And visually, that's going to look weird because, that's not what the picture looks like. But, you have to use your imagination as an artist, and see things that aren't really there in a way to, help strengthen things so that when you paint the things that are there, that they have something to stand on, there's a foundation to it, And so part of it is that, part of it is, knowing that you haven't got to the finish line yet, and there are going to be some parts of the race that look like crap, and, some parts you're going to look like, a gazelle, But really it's just an effort in, trying to maintain human-made art in this day and age, and to touch humanity, real people, everyday people even, not just legends or superstars or the living or the dead or anybody, just everybody, basically. And that's my interest, and the nature of me doing things like this and painting the person and then painting the skeleton or the skull of that person, the memento mori, is a nod to, life and death. We're here for a good time, not a long time, and that, on the outside, we're just flesh, and on the inside we're bone, and beauty is skin deep and ugly goes right to the bone, And so, in essence, like, carpe diem, seize the day, because, the night cometh. Yeah. So that's why I do that. And, so far I've seemingly got a lot of appreciation for it as a, something that I do in this project. I got a couple people lined up as to who I want to paint next. Some interesting people. So I'd ask you to stick tuned and, keep checking me out. And whenever you feel brave enough, hit me up. Send me a picture of your face. Yeah. Send me a picture of your face. Let me paint you. You're the most interesting person. Everybody knows Deborah Harry. Let me paint you as cool as I can paint her. You're probably not as pretty as she is, but I mean, if you are, I'll try to do justice. I promise. I promise. Anyway, thanks guys for watching. I appreciate it. Like I said, stay tuned. Got some more faces for the gallery.
Thank you for your visit to the Drop Dead Gorgeous Gallery. We hope you enjoyed your time while you were here. We encourage you to come back with your earliest convenience. If you would like to be a victim, an exhibit in the gallery, contact us. Thank you.